الله أكبر الله أكبر.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم آمين. Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak to everybody who's here. We begin in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. And we ask that He send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family, his companions, his wives, and upon all of the believers until Yawm al-Qiyamah. I wanted to begin today's session with a story from the seerah of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. It's a famous story. Many of you have probably heard it before, heard different versions of it over time. And it's the story of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. How many people have heard of that before? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Raise your hand. You know, it's very interesting. SubhanAllah, I don't think we spend enough time really looking at how instrumental that treaty was. And we can have actually a whole class about that later on, inshallah, perhaps. But just let me go through kind of the mechanics of what happened with that treaty. The Muslims had set out from Medina, and they had set out for no other reason than to visit the house of Allah Azza wa Jal. And they were stopped at a place called Hudaybiyah by the Quraysh. And at one point, they thought there was going to be a war between the Madinis, the Muslims, and the Quraysh. And the Muslims were all in Ihram, by the way. At this point, they were all in Ihram. Right? So they're not allowed any violence, nothing like that. They didn't carry even their arms with them. There was some debate about that. But eventually, they get to Hudaybiyah, and there's a negotiation. They agree to have a negotiation between the Quraysh and the Muslims. And the Muslims and the Quraysh are now going to negotiate the terms of a treaty. And the man that was sent on behalf of Quraysh to negotiate the terms with the Messenger of God, ﷺ, was a man by the name of Suhail ibn Amr. Suhail ibn Amr, one of the elite of Mecca. He was known, in fact, for his speeches. They would remember him for his eloquence in speech. His own children had become Muslim. Abu Jadda and Abdullah had become Muslim themselves. But he himself was of the elite of Quraysh, wanted nothing to do with Islam. He's not that bold. But they knew that he was very shrewd. They knew this guy, he's going to be able to negotiate the best terms for us. So they go and they send Suhail ibn Amr to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to the Messenger of God. And they begin to write, after they agree to the terms, they begin to write the treaty. And it begins with the Muslims, Ali ibn Abi Talib in particular, and others that were writing, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. Suhail ibn Amr said, oh, hold up. Stop right there. What is this Rahman Rahim stuff? This merciful and gracious stuff. Just write Bismillah in your name of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ actually had the companions scratch out Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim and put Bismillah. It continued. This is a treaty between Suhail, the son of Umar, on behalf of Quraysh, and Muhammad Rasulullah, Messenger of God. Suhail ibn Amr right there said, no, stop right there. Stop right there. If I had known you to be the Messenger of God, I wouldn't be fighting you. If I had known you to be the Messenger of God, I wouldn't be on this side of the equation. I'd be with you. Scratch that out and put Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. In fact, Ali ibn Abi Talib did not even want to scratch out Rasulullah. The Prophet ﷺ took his hand and made him scratch it out. So he put Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. Years ago, when I was studying with Imam Siraj Raj, he mentioned to us the importance of this one line. If I had known you to be the messenger of God, I wouldn't be fighting. Many of us, we live our lives with this romantic concept of who the Prophet ﷺ was. We don't know him. We don't know his story. We don't know his companions. We don't know his life the way we should. And why is it that we have to know him? You know, the title for this talk is Loving Rasulullah. You can't love someone that you don't know. You can't love someone that you have not spent time with. In fact, in that same class with Imam Shad, he mentioned, you can't give dawah to someone you don't love. Think about that for a moment. You know, we can't give dawah, we can't invite others to Islam if we hate them to begin with. If we hate them to begin with, that's what's manifest in our hearts, it's going to come out in the way that we're speaking to them. It's going to come out in the way that we're treating them. So he said, if you want to really invite people to Islam, love them. That's where it starts. So this session is more than just about loving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's about knowing him. These sessions, as we spend in these brief moments after Dhuhr on Saturdays, are about getting to know who he was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May his peace and blessings be upon him. And today, I wanted to just share a few insights, a few stories from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And I want to begin actually with a description that's related to us in the Shama'il of Tirmidhi, one of the great hadith collectors. He wrote a book on the attributes of the Prophet. And I'm going to read to you, it's actually a relatively long hadith, but just the last part of it, and then I'll translate it. And actually, subhanAllah, funny story about this hadith. Some of the brothers here actually know this story. I was with a friend of mine at work. He's actually, let me read the hadith first, and then I'll tell you the story. So at the end of the hadith, Ali ibn Abi Talib starts describing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's actually, the first half of the hadith is just description of his physical attributes. He had, his hair was this long, his chest was this wide, that kind of thing. Then he says here, بين كتفيه خاتم النبوة وهو خاتم النبيين. Between his shoulder blades was the seal of prophethood, and he is the last of the prophets. Then he says, أجود الناس صدرا وأصدق الناس لهجة وألينهم عريكة وأكرمهم عشرة من رآه بديهة هابه ومن خالته معرفة أحبه. I'll translate what this is in a moment. The story I was telling you, a colleague of mine at work, a non-Muslim co-worker, who's Arab, he's an Arab Christian, found this book actually on my desk in the cubicle. And he's an Arab Christian, so he recognized it as Arabic. He grew up in Iraq. He comes up to me and he's like, "Oh, can I read? Can I read some of this?" I was like, "Sure." So he picks up this hadith. Of all the hadith, he picks up this particular one. And he goes through and he's reading the description of the Prophet ﷺ. And he gets to this line right here. أَجْوَدُ النَّاسِ صَدْرًا. And he says, whoa, whoa. And he continues, وَأَصْدَقَ النَّاسِ بِلَهْجَةً. It's like, man, that's deep. And I asked him, I was like, at the time I actually didn't know what this translated into. I was like, why? He's like, Shad, people don't describe other people like this, ever. He's like, you really gotta love someone to describe them this way. This is a non-Muslim, Christian Arab, who's simply looking at what Ali ibn Abi Talib said about the Prophet ﷺ, and he's saying, this is unreal. Why? What is the description? أَجْوَدُ النَّاسِ صَدْرًا. He was the most generous of people with his heart. Think of it in terms of he's open-hearted. He's like, in this one statement, you've encompassed how people felt welcome and comfortable in front of him. And then he says, وَأَصْدَقُ النَّاسِ لَهْجَةً. He was the most truthful of people, with his tongue. What's amazing here, Ali ibn Abi Talib didn't just say he was a nice guy. He could have just said he was a nice guy. He could have said he was just a truthful man. No, he was the nicest of all people I'd ever met with amongst mankind. أجود الناس صدرا. Not even أجود, the qawmi صدرا. Not even the best of the Arabs. The best of all people. The most generous of all people. This was his description. He goes on to describe him, saying that he was the most, not the truthful, the most truthful of people. And then he continues, وَأَلْيَنَهُمْ عَلِيكَةً. And he was the most gentle in character. In his harika is like your inner being, your inner, what's really inside you, your inner character. He was the most gentle of people. وَأَكْرَمَهُمْ عِشْرَةً. And he came from the most noble of lineage. Then the following line, he literally, my friend read this and put the book down. He put the book down after he said, مَنْ رَآهُ بَدِيهَةً حَابَهُ. When a person first met the Prophet ﷺ, they would be in awe of him. When you first have that first meeting, you're in awe of the Prophet. You look at him, you're like, man, there's something special about this guy. Something different. He had, they say in today's culture, he had an aura. He had like this glow about him. They had this, they'd say actually in corporate America, when you have a presence, he had a presence. You knew you were in the presence of someone. مَنْ رَآهُ بَدِيهَةً هَابَهُ وَمَنْ خَالَتَهُ مَعْرِفَةً أَحَبَّهُ. And anyone who got to know him, who spent some time with him, they loved him. They began to love him. What is Ali ibn Abi Talib describing here? Khalatahu, the word here is the same word you use for like when you're in the marketplace with somebody. You're not in a formal setting where, a person is teaching a class. Because people could say, oh, maybe he's just like that as a teacher. Khalata here is, he's just with the people. He's in the marketplace, he's walking with them, he's talking to them. It's in a very informal setting. And in that type of informality, what happens? Ahabba. They begin to love the Prophet. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So our challenge, brothers and sisters, is we don't have the good fortune of living with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? We don't have that today. He's not alive today. What we have is the ability to study and get to know him. To get to know him. And I would argue that there's three main reasons that we want to do this. The first reason is because in studying the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see a deeper connection between the Quran and our own lives. Now, this is the month of the Quran, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. In studying the Prophet's life, we begin to see how dynamic the Quran was. We begin to see how it was a living reality for the Prophet and his companions. It was not just a book in one form that we have on a shelf today. This was something that was addressing very real needs of the people and concerns of them today, or at that time. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ, they ask you concerning the spirit, or يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ أَهِلَّةِ, they ask you concerning the moon. Who are they talking to? Who's asking? They, the Quraysh, or the people in Medina, are asking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we study these verses, it begins to give us context when we know who he was, alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? When we begin to connect the pieces together with the seerah, we begin to have this deeper relationship with the book of Allah Azza wa Jalla, with the book of Allah Almighty. This is number one. Number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran as uswatun hasana, the best of examples for us. You know, my wife and I, we were just talking about this morning. Children, oftentimes, we see this, and probably with our own children, and if you don't have any, just take our word for it. Children model behaviors. Is this true or not true? They model, I mean, they're sponges. They take it in, right? They will take in everything around you. I mean, we've had a number of occasions where, my wife and I think we're having a private conversation, and then 3 days later, my daughter will mention, or my son will mention something that we mentioned in the car. Right? Why? Because they're sponges. They're just soaking it all in. And what we see with children, and what modern studies show, is that if we want our children to be a certain way, we actually have to be that way ourselves, because they will model the behavior after. This, by the way, is not simply with children. This is a human attribute, human characteristic. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said, a person is on the deen of their companions. They are on the path of their companions. Because if you hang out with somebody long enough, you start to do what they do. You start to be what they're like. This is a reality, and I've seen this now, I'm sure all of you as well. I've seen this in our own lives. I remember how I was, for instance, in college. There was one brother in particular. He was very, very hardcore about Fajr prayer. I was not so hardcore, let's just say, in college. Right? It was very difficult to get me up for Fajr. He'd literally walk into my dorm room, he'd throw water on my face, he'd get me up, say, come on, it's time to pray Fajr. And subhanAllah, in our second semester, in our last year together, he actually had the idea of, you know what, we're 5 minutes from the masjid. I can finally get you out of bed. Let's actually start going to the masjid. And it was really a casual conversation. But I hung out with him a lot. And what naturally happened, a natural consequence of that, is we started getting up and going to Fajr. What both of us found was after we had graduated, moved back into our own respective communities, were apart from each other, we still called one another to get each other up to go to the masjid for Fajr. Simply because now it had become part of our lives. Now it had just become part of what we were doing. Again, we started modeling each other's behaviors and encouraging one another towards it. We study the life of the Prophet ﷺ. We get to go into the different aspects, as Adam was saying, about how he was with his companions, how he was with his children, how he was with his family, how he was with non-Muslims. Why? Not simply for intellectual knowledge, but so that we can begin to model those behaviors in our own lives. This is why we're studying the life. This is why he's uswatun hasana. We sometimes forget about that. We forget that God has made him the example for us. I'll share a few brief stories with you that I think really encapsulate who the Prophet ﷺ was. How many people were here in January when Umar Sulaiman gave a talk here at the Adam Center? Raise your hand, do you remember? He gave a talk on service to humanity. And one of the stories he shared was a story of Zayd ibn Sana. Zayd ibn Sana, who was one of the rabbis amongst the Jewish people in Medina. And he said that Zayd ibn Sana, he had studied in the books of the Talmud and the Torah, and realized at that time that the Jewish people were due for a prophet. So he looked into the signs of the prophet that was to come. And he was in Medina. After the Prophet ﷺ himself had emigrated there, he decided to check him out. He said, this guy keeps saying that he's a messenger of God. I know, in our books, I know what the signs are. Let me just go and check him out. So he comes to the Prophet ﷺ as the Prophet is sitting around with his companions in Medina. They're seated together in a majlis. Right? And he asks the companions, where is your messenger? They point out, I think that's in and of itself amazing. You couldn't tell the Prophet of Allah from the messengers himself, from the companions themselves. Because he was with the people. Right? He didn't have he didn't wear a nice stove and a robe. And he didn't have a throne that he sat on, nothing like that. He was just with them. And so, he doesn't even recognize them. At first he said, where is you? They say, that's him. Pointing to where the Prophet is. Zayd ibn Sana walks up to the Prophet ﷺ, and he insults him. Insults him not like how you and I may think of it, but essentially he says, your grandfather, and your grandfather's father, you're all the same, you don't pay your debts on time. Now, it's an insult when, this is something, by the way, that the Arabs, especially at that time, took a lot of pride in. So, it's one thing to say, you don't pay your debts. You're cheap and you're miserly. You don't do those things. That's one thing. But to bring up one's ancestors is a whole other level. There's a whole other level. In the 1990s, when I was growing up, if you had to say, if you said something about somebody's mama, it was a problem. They had jokes about it all around on television. This is somewhat simple, right? So here, now they're being insulted. He's been insulted. Who's next to the Prophet? Who do you think was next to him? Umar ibn Khattab. What do you think he did? He stood up, said, Rasulullah, give me the word, I'm going to take care of him for you. He did what Umar does. And he's not, again, out of love. He's not doing this out of, he's standing up, saying, no, I'll take care. Look, how dare you insult him like that in our presence? He even says something like that in the riwayah. How dare you say this in front of us? When Umar ibn Khattab, I think it was, how dare you say this when Umar ibn Khattab is standing next to the Messenger of God? Right? He's saying this. The Prophet ﷺ says, leave him. Umar, go to my home and give the man the money that's due to him. That's all he says. He just says, go and give him his money. Umar is walking with the rabbi. And the rabbi turns, he says, Umar, do you know who I am? Umar says, no. He probably said, frankly, I don't care, and I don't want to know. It's probably what he said, right? Want nothing to do with you, after the way you treated, the messenger of God. He says, no, my name is Zayd ibn Sana. Now, Umar is a smart man. The companions knew, even amongst the Jewish tribes in Medina, who the scholars were. So he recognized him. He recognized that name. He said, Zayd, you're the scholar amongst the Jewish people. He said, yes. He said, well, what was that you just did? It was you're trying to say, this is ultimate disrespect that you showed. Why did you do that? Zayd ibn Sana said the following. He said, I looked into the books and I realized that one of the signs of the Prophet was that he would be a man of hilm. Hilm, they translate as forbearance in English. It's a bad translation. Hilm is actually when you have a right to be upset and angry, you don't get upset and angry. Even though you have a right. Because some people get angry just, willy-nilly, right? Somebody just quick to anger, they have short tempers, what have you. This is a person who's saying he actually has a right to be upset and to be angry with someone, but he brushes it aside. Lets it go. Zayd ibn Sana said, I came to test your Prophet in his hilm. And after testing him, I testify that there is no God except Allah, and He is the messenger of God. See this? Simply by his character alone, in one meeting, in one instance, a man went from being the scholars amongst his people to being a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the types of stories that oftentimes we don't know. We haven't spent time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We overlook the aspects of his life in which he dealt with other people and how he dealt with them. And that's really the main purpose of this series. In doing so, when we look into stories like this, and by the way, they're all about in the seerah of the Prophet. I'll share with you one more. It's the famous hadith that many of us have come upon, that I was really struck by how one of my teachers analyzed this hadith. It's a hadith of a woman who's crying because of the loss of her child. This is, one of the most difficult things for a parent to go through. SubhanAllah, just a few years ago, there was I have a cousin Imam, who drowned in the Potomac River in Great Falls Park. Because one of his friends slipped, and he actually jumped in after him to rescue him. And unfortunately, both of them were carried away in the currents. And I remember visiting my khala's house during that time. And I didn't have children of my own at that point. And just looking at her, I could say, this is the most difficult thing anybody will ever have to do. To bury their own child. And this was a woman who had to do that. Very difficult. The Prophet ﷺ is coming by. And he reminds her, show patience at this moment. This moment, show patience if you can. The woman, without even turning to look, says, you don't know what I've been through. Brushing the person aside. The Prophet ﷺ, you don't know what I've been through. The Prophet ﷺ walks away. Look at the wisdom here. He walked away. He recognized her psychological state. He recognized this is a woman who's going through a musibah, through a trial and a tribulation, unlike other people that they have to experience. And he recognized her psychological state, and he walked away. A short time later, she realizes it was the messenger of God that had come to her. And she goes to his home, and she's full of remorse. And she says, Ya Rasulullah, I didn't know it was you. I didn't know it was you. You know what the Prophet ﷺ did? He simply repeated his advice. He said, show patience at the onset of a calamity. Now, he could have said, I told you so, and you should have paid attention, and you should have asked. He had every right to do that. Did he not? He was the messenger of God. He could have done that, but he didn't. That's al-yanahul arikatan. That is the gentleness and softness of his character. Some of us, subhanAllah, we hear stories like this, and we think to ourselves, well, he was the messenger, and, I've got bigger problems. Really. I've got problems with my job, I've got problems with home, I've got problems with my work, I've got issues that I'm dealing with, and all of this, and I've got family dynamics, and all this crazy stuff that I have to deal with in my life. And we forget about what he had to deal with, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is a man who buried every single one of his own children with his own hands, except for Fatima radiallahu anha. Didn't we just talk about how difficult it is for a parent to bury their own child? Every single one, except for Fatima, was buried with his own hands. The day of the Battle of Badr, the day in which, against all odds, the Muslims won. They had, if you look at it statistically or mathematically, there's no reason they should have won that battle. None. They were outnumbered 3-1. They were outgunned, outarmed, outhorsed, out everything on that day. And yet, with the help of Allah Azza wa Jal, they came back victorious to Medina. And this had to, you just think about it for a moment, this had to have been one of the greatest joys of the Prophet and his companions at that moment. And yet the first piece of news that hits the messenger of God as he enters into Medina, Uthman ibn Affan comes to him and says, Your daughter Ruqayya died while you were away. In fact, Uthman himself, who was married to Ruqayya, was taking care of her. Imagine that for a moment. As one of my teachers once said, Dr. Sherman Jackson, prophethood is not a job you want. If you look at everything that the messenger went through, there was probably not even 1 month that went by in which there wasn't some personal tragedy that affected him. Something really deeply that hurt him, that had to have made him upset. At those moments, he's greeted with the news of the death of his own child. And yet, what is it that Imam al-Haramain said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said, except for the La ilaha illallah, the Prophet may have never said La in his life. Translation, except for the no in no God except God, the Prophet may have never said no in his life. People came to him with their issues. They came to him with their problems. He always accepted them. Openly. Ajwadun nasu sabra. Most open-hearted of people. He accepted them as they were. He didn't judge them. He didn't say, well, what's your qualifications? How Muslim are you? Do you pray 5 times a day? Do you fast in the month of Ramadan? Did you fight in the battle of Badr? He didn't ask for qualification. He accepted them as they were. And this, brothers and sisters, is part of the behavior that we need to emulate in our own communities. Accept people as they are, not where we want them to be. You know? I mean, many years ago, I remember, Imam Majid actually, Hafidhullah, he mentioned to us in a class, we have to remember Islam is not a race. It's not a race. It's not who can be the best Muslim first. We're all in this together. Some people may be running, some people may be walking, some people may be crawling. As long as they're on the path to God, it's okay. Accept people as they are. When we study the life of the Prophet ﷺ, brothers and sisters, we get a deeper appreciation for Quran. We begin to understand the behaviors that we should model in our own lives, with our own children, with our friends, with our non-Muslims, with our Muslims, with our community members. And finally, we begin to really understand why we say, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May the peace and blessings of God be upon him. Because if anyone on earth deserved the peace and blessings of God, it was him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. For what he lived through, for what he sacrificed, and for what he showed us about a person's true humanity. This is why we say, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Messenger of God mentioned in the hadith, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent to perfect noble character. To show you nobility of character. In fact, إِنَّمَا, at the beginning of the Arabic, qualifies the statement to make it, I have only been sent to show good character, for nobility of character. This, brothers and sisters, is what we should be gaining from the life of the Prophet. It's not just stories. It's not just war stories. It's not just stories with dates and names and places. It's an understanding of how we should live our lives in these times. What would the Prophet ﷺ do? That's what we should be doing. Maybe if we do that, then others will describe us in generations to come as Ajwadun Nasi Sadra, or Asdaqun Nasi Lahjata, or Alyanahum Arikata. That we weren't just good people, we weren't just nice people, we weren't just truthful people, we were the best of people. We were the most kind of people. We were the most generous of people. And we were the softest, most generous, or the most gentle and merciful of people. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a character like the character of the Messenger of God. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inculcates within us an ability to emulate him and to model his behaviors. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fills our hearts with love for the beloved Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us maximize this month of Ramadan. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us grow in our love for his beloved alayhi salatu wasalam. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us overcome our own inefficiencies and overlook the faults of our brothers and sisters. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the best in this world and the best in the next world and protects us from the punishment of the fire. We'll take, inshallah, I think we have a little bit of time, so we'll take, if there's any questions and answers, questions, I'll take the questions. I may or may not answer them. Oh, you're leaving now? Are there any questions this time?
Yeah, I have.
Yes.
Whether, isn't that it is better to be alone than the bad company? You are known by the company you keep. You are known by your friends. It was always in the company of, Jesus was always in the company of the scholars. Then he was young boy like him. And Prophet ﷺ, isn't that right?
So Jazakallah khair. So the sister is asking.
People, you sit and you learn the knowledge.
So the sister is asking a question. She's saying, what's the best environment to have around us, right? The Prophet ﷺ said that a person is on the path of their companions, right? The people that they keep, the company that they keep. And it's
footsteps.
Yes, and they're in their footsteps. So it's important for us, the important lesson for us is to surround ourselves with good people. It's very, very important. In fact, as we do that, we have the ability to change our own behavior, right? There's a famous qadi from Tunis, Sahnun. Sahnun was known for some of his strict rulings. And one of the rulings he had, there was a woman who was running a really bad type of brothel, or a brothel actually, in his community. And when they asked him what should be her punishment, he said, take her and put her in a neighborhood of righteous people. So some of the people were confused. This is a woman who's running a brothel, and then you're asking us to put her in a neighborhood of righteous. He said, yes, because I'm not interested in punishing her, I'm interested in her changing her behavior. You know, we have, even here in America, there's a lot of punitive damages. You put people in jail and you punish them, but sometimes we're not giving them or equipping them with the right ways in which to change their behavior. Such that criminals that go into jail oftentimes are more prone and more likely to go back in for some other criminal behavior once they're out. Islam is interested in rectification. It's interested in changing a person's behavior to be better. We do that by surrounding ourselves with good people, like righteous people, inshallah. So
thank you very much.
We'll do that. Any other questions?
My questions are very nicely answered. Thank you. It was a very, very nice
Yeah,
question.
this is a good, actually some other people are asking, this is the Shamal of Tirmidhi. It has been translated into English. It's called, I think, Prophetic Characteristics is how they translate it. There's also, for anybody who's interested in foundational studies in Seerah, a good place to start, a good book to start with is Tariq Ramadan's In the Footsteps of the Prophet. He shares many of the types of stories that we have. It's in lessons, it's really more lessons from the life of the Prophet. So Tariq Ramadan, In the Footsteps of the Prophet is a very good good session.
It is Seerah Nabi?
It's this is Shamal al-Tirmidhi.
Yes.
This is in English also. Yeah, you can get it. I want to just, if you don't have any more questions, I want to end by sending salam on the Prophet ﷺ. So we'll go ahead and do that 10 times, inshallah, as a group, and then we'll end the session for today. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Oh Allah, we ask that you send peace upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad and his family in the same way that you have sent peace and blessings upon the Prophet Ibrahim and his family. Oh Allah, we ask that you bless the Prophet Muhammad and his family in the same way that you have blessed the Prophet Ibrahim and his family. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
الله أكبر.